Okay, so if you have one more idea or thought, go ahead and finish that as you're writing down those words, getting them identified down to your 5. Okay, so if you still need to finish one, go ahead. So I kind of identified how you might fit into these groups. So I kind of created table groups where we might be a little further dispersed. Take a minute, whatever, just to share. If you wanted to give a little bit of an explanation around the word, that's fine. But have at least each person have a chance to just share out those 5, and then as a table. So we're taking the next 2 bullet points, and then as a table or as a group, I've kind of lumped you together. Select 3 central ideas that were in common, and then let's do that part first. So just come up with 3 central ideas that are in common, and then we'll talk about putting the category on it. So get a chance to hear what others are saying, and look at narrowing it down to 3 recurring themes or ideas that seem to generate. Okay? Questions you might have around that stuff? All right, go ahead. Good. Stopping point. And then conversations to a close. All right, so let's see. We've had a chance to kind of get all those ideas out there and simmer them down to one main category. Let's see what we have going in the room. So if we don't mind, we'll share here and work our way around. Yeah. Your label.
Reflection.
So reflection. Thank you.
The label is data.
Data. So reflection, data. How about here? That's Seago, I believe, right?
Just anyone? Any word?
Did you come down to kind of?
3. Do you want us to share all 3?
Were you able to label it?
Yes. We have 3 labels. We have 3 labels.
You came up with 3 labels, okay? No problem. That's fine.
Well, we have communication,
Okay.
analysis, and implementation.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. No problem. More ideas on the table? We're good? Thank you.
We put either actionable or purposeful action.
Okay. Actionable or purposeful action? Okay. Thank you. Organization? Okay. Great. So the idea, right, in the activity is to take all the learning we've done throughout and start to boil it down to what is that big idea, which actually supports implementation, right? So I talked in my earlier session about that the nature of the work that you're doing, it's going to constantly pull us in other directions, right? And that's that's happening in all fields. The thing that we need to refine is the way that we react or handle those bumps in the road or those adjustments, because as technology or information or research changes, we're adapting to that. But it's about how quickly do we adapt. So I used the analogy this morning of every time things change, they say every time I take a step forward, I have to take 2 steps back. So how can we take a step forward and take a quarter step back instead of 2 full steps? And the way to do that is by being able to process this, right, and make those adjustments, right? Start to focus on what are the things that are our guiding forces, what are we believing in, and how can we move that forward and make the new research and the new learning fit within that so we can continue forward, right? But we still want to reflect it, but moving forward. All right. Thank your groups, and you can head back. Make sure as you're doing that, though, you've at least got a partner, because we're going to have partners for this next part. All right. So our outcomes, right? Clearly identifying those data measures, talking about that process, exploring and discussing how to then use that data to inform. So today we've gone through the welcome, just reviewed the outcomes. We're going to go through our normal pieces and then get into this celebration and sharing component, and then talk about next steps in your final reflections and journaling. So here's our quote that hopefully you've been able to possibly take advantage of. Or again, we keep putting this in front because this is what our driving force is. Actually, I was chuckling because Simon Sinek, where this comes from, right? So this is our why. So why do we do the work that we do? This is the actual book that leads to that. Just highlighted one of the fabulous prizes that's out there. You can see it in a TED Talk too, but he actually wrote a book about it. Our MTSS framework, right? So possibly some of those categoricals or those labels that you came up with, maybe they fit in these headings or maybe they fit under those headings. But these are all pieces, right? No wonder it's so difficult to juggle the system if these are all the components that are going on within it that somehow have to interwork with each other and in a fluid way, right? This isn't simple work that's occurring. There's a lot to it. We've overstressed, right, this 4 types of assessment. I don't know that even though I say we've overstressed it, I don't know if that can be done. I actually bumped across the sheets not from this year's LCN, but actually last year's group around using data. And if you were a part of that group, and you remember the first day we actually put posters up that defined each of these 5 methods of assessment. And so what we did is we had folks define it, and then we had the next step was to put a poster up that said, what assessments do you have in district that meet this type of data collection? So what is your universal screener? What is your progress monitor? What is your diagnostic? What is your outcome? And what is your program or quality fidelity measure? Right? So I just ran across that. I don't think we can instruct that enough. And so you've had this opportunity over these 5 days to delve deeper into that. How do we make sure everyone understands that when they're coming to the data review table or MTSS or problem solving, whatever you're calling that meeting, right? We want to continually build our colleagues' understandings of what this data means when we look at it, and then what measures actually get to giving us information around it, and then how to use it, right? Very important pieces. So nice grid for you to share. And then, as we've spoken to, we want this outcomes-driven model. In other words, how are we identifying, validating, working through it to be able to then see those outcomes at each benchmark. All right, so if you take the next couple of minutes, I'm going to have you get into your Google Classroom because I want you to be able to pull up your implementation guide. And what we're going to do as you're pulling that up is we are going to get into preparing to go about our celebration. So today we're going to get a chance to hear what some of the inner workings are that we've actually taken and gone forward. Some of you have had a chance with me in the Google Doc to interact back and forth around some of the idea or thinking that you're doing, or we've just had more informal conversations. Now it's a chance for others to hear how you've been taking whatever portion of the learning from this session and taking it to action. So in order to do that, we're going to go through these 3 steps. The first step is to allow you the opportunity to just sit and have a conversation with the folks that you're around, whether you pair up or get into a group of 3. What I want you to think about is what of the learning that you've done over the 4 days or however many days you've been able to attend, what was an intention that you carried back? How did that intention go, whether it was good or bad? And then what's evidence you have around that or big ideas in reflection, okay? So this is just the planning time. This is for you to have a conversation with someone around what you've tried and how it went well or how you'd like to do it differently and reflect into why evidence were applicable. I'm going to shift ahead a couple slides just to give you a feel for why the conversation in this way. We will delve into this protocol. This protocol itself, I'm going to skip over it because it's more about how we interact while folks are actually sharing. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. But while you're generating and having this conversation now, I want you to think about this. As you share, it's just a 2 to 4 minute, and it could be less, right? It could be a little bit less. You don't have to take a full 2 minutes, but I think you'll find that 2 minutes goes by quickly. Just sharing what it was that you took forward. Might be something as simple as, you remember this resource you showed around progress monitoring. We took that back to our problem-solving meetings, and we talked about, in our problem-solving meeting, where do we see these pieces? And that led to this, which then we considered that, and we did and all these things, right? So you might just tell a little story about what that sparked. Once that 2 to 4 minute opportunity to share is complete, then we'll do the noticings based off of this, analyzing this document further. We'll take noticings, extend them out into wonderings, and then I'll come in with the paraphrase and the thanking piece, etc. Right? I'm thinking ideally we might get through 3. So if we could have 3 folks as they're kind of talking and discussing that might be willing to share that out, I'll come and check in as you're discussing. But I think we could get through 3, maybe 4. We'll see. I got through 3 of them this morning. And it's just a chance for you to get a feel for that process overall. Okay? So I just wanted you to know it's about a 2 to 4 minute piece where you give me, or give the group an idea, a context, what you tried, what your evidence was, and what steps you took next, and what that looked like. Okay? And again, it could be around one piece, or it could be about how it's evolved as you've been learning more through the network. So here's kind of those big ideas that lead to that 2 to 4 minute possible explanation or sharing. What questions might you have around your next few steps of dialogue? Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and talk about some of the things that you've done and share with your table mates. And then in about 5 minutes, I'll be checking in, but in about 5 minutes, we'll see about moving into that next step. Okay? Go ahead. Okay, if we could have conversations come to a good stopping point. And then conversations to a close. All right. So you've had a chance to discuss and further refine what ideas were generated, what came of the discussion. That gets to that first 2 to 4 minutes. The next piece then is how are we going to reflect? And we want to make sure that we have that safe and judgment-free environment. So if you pull out your yellow sheets that had the schedule on it, as we call it, flip it over to the back. So what's opposite the schedule? You should see a document that looks like this. The safe and judgment-free environment. What I'd like you to do with our say something strategy, which is if you're in partners or groups of 3 are fine, agree to, it pretty much spells out where you're going to have, I would look at what it is as one section. So you simultaneously, meaning at the same time, read this section together. Once you're done reading it, one partner shares something they pulled from it. Then the other partner shares something from it. Then read this section, what it isn't. Go back into that share, maybe partner B this time, so have a different partner share first. And then read through the additional question samples. Just get to know this document because it's going to provide the scaffolding needed to be able to go into the noticings and then the noticings with the wonderings. All right? So the noticings themselves, the reason it says no crosstalk is those are like, if you think of science, like the claim, evidence, reasoning, it's just the evidence that we hear. So as we hear the 2 to 4 minute piece, we're just stating what we heard. Okay, and you'll get to hear more about that with that noticing piece. Whereas the wonderings are going to be, here's what I heard, here's what I noticed, and here's what I wondered. And I'll get deeper into that, but I want you to delve into this document for a second as your teams, whatever that, if you're in partners or trios, and analyze, and we'll use that say something strategy. And then at the end, just note, I'll give you 1 or 2 minutes at the end to make sure to share out things that seem clear or things that you would like. So what are things that make you go, oh, okay, this makes sense, or oh, I see why, or I see how I could connect this, or help me understand if you need a clarification around something stated on there. All right, so I'll be looking for those 2 pieces at the end. We'll give you about 3-4 minutes right now to delve into that, and then we'll come back together as a group. Okay, questions you may have. All right. Go ahead.